My guest today is Diego Borgo, strategic advisor to Fortune 500 brands on how to enter the metaverse and Web3. Diego's lifetime personal brand is clear. 1, he's an outsider, having moved 35 times in 33 years. 2, he's always looking at things differently and challenging the status quo. And 3, he aspires to build personal freedom, which goes beyond money. It's more about the freedom to do what he wants when he wants. His career in marketing started at 16 years old in 2007, where he helped brands like Samsung, Warner Bros., and Microsoft understand the world of esports. He took those learnings to the client side at Adidas next, which is where he was introduced to Web3. Most recently, he has advised brands like Porsche, Salesforce, and Shell on Web3 strategies. He has a masterclass on bringing brands into the space, and it shows because his thinking is so clear on how to approach legacy brands and introducing Web3. LFG, baby. Let's start vibing.
Zach French is a bar-certified attorney, and nothing expressed by Zach during Web3 with me shall be considered legal advice. All the opinions expressed by Zach and his guests are solely their own opinions. All content in Web3 with me is for informational purposes only. Zach and his podcast guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed during Web3 with me.
Welcome to the show, Diego.
Thank you. I'm stoked, man. Thanks for having me.
I have to say, this is the first show where I have catered my background to my guest. I totally dig your pink beanie vibes. It's very consistent. It's on brand. Typically, these would be rainbow beans, but I went to the founder of the beans, who's a good friend of mine. And I said, can you make it pink just for the show?
I appreciate it, man. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I've been excited about this. I just kind of stumbled across your work on LinkedIn, and you're doing, I think, what a lot of people, including myself, want to be doing, right? Like, you are going to the big brands, you're overcoming the perspective problem that's facing Web3. So I'm excited to dive in.
Stoked to hear. Yeah, let's go. I'm ready.
So I always start with a founding story so that my audience can get to know you a little bit better. So feel free to start wherever you'd like.
Yeah. So I'll give a bit of like a long term and then cut it short for the current situation. So born in Brazil, grew up there. I'm 33 years old now, but I moved 35 times in my life. So you can imagine, how that went. A lot of people ask me why I am an alien or why my PFP is an alien. And that's how I felt throughout my whole life, by being thrown into new spaces and new rooms and always be seen as the outsider. Right. And that started in my own country because Brazil is so big. And depending where you live, you're always an outsider because you're coming from somewhere else. You speak funny, you're different. Right. And then from there, I moved to other countries. So I lived in Canada, I lived in Austria, I lived in Germany, I lived in Bali, and now I live in Portugal. So, that element of being an outsider has been throughout my whole life when it comes to the locations I've been living, but also by the way I think and the way I sort of like proceed things and express myself. So I suck at school. School was the worst time I ever had. A lot of people say like, oh, you're becoming more and more successful now. You should have been great at school. I was like, no, it's rather the opposite. Like every week I'll be sent home because I didn't want to comply with a stupid norm that they want to enforce on me. Or, I would question things that you cannot question. So, that alien element followed me my whole life, which is a gift and is a curse, right? I've been, like questioning the status quo and trying to get people to think differently about several things, and sometimes it was a little bit too pushy, right? And that's kind of like how I got in a lot of troubles throughout my school time. I started working really at a young age. I started working at 14 years old, not because I had to, because I wanted to. So that entrepreneurship was always on me, right? My first business was selling, skateboard, the tech decks, back on time you had the small ones. So I'll go to a street in São Paulo where I grew up and buy a bunch of like small parts of skateboards, put that in a plastic toolbox, go to school and sell to my friends and say, oh, you can customize your skateboard. Here's a pink wheel. Here's a different deck. And that was my first business. So I'll do like 30-40x on the initial investment just by giving them the idea of personalization or the feeling of personalization and uniqueness behind it. So my whole sort of like was like that, right? 1, the outsider; 2, the one that's looking at things differently; and 3, the one that wants to build my personal freedom. Was never about the money. It was never about the flexing, the building the biggest empire in town. Was always about creating personal freedom, so I can do whatever I want and whenever I want, right? So that's what business and money mean to me. It means freedom of choice. So all of that wrapped with my experience in marketing and agency side, client side. I spent since I was 16 years old. That was my first job in an agency. I've spent the last, I don't know, 15 years on that side, right? Marketing, digital strategy, branding. In my first job, I was basically helping companies like Samsung, Red Bull, Warner Bros, Microsoft to understand the world of esports back in 2007, when the video game was still in the basement, not in the living room. So that's kind of like where culture got into my veins, where marketing got into my veins, where branding got into my veins. And then from there I just kept building into it. I My last sort of like job was within Adidas. I was there for 4 years in Germany in the headquarters, helping the brand on the digital side, to sort of like understand the new opportunities within that space. I've been in blockchain since 2017. That's when I first heard of the possibilities, the use case, the technology, what that could potentially bring to us, a part of all the Ponzi schemes that we know really well and we all got rugged by. So I'm really excited about the technology, truly, because I believe that there is ways on which we can iterate in the current state of the internet, and blockchain will be the responsible for helping us getting there, right? To evolving from where we are to where we want to be. So that's kind of like what got me excited about blockchain. The moment for me that NFTs, Web3, and metaverse had a turning point in my life was when I was at Adidas. Right, I first heard of NFTs, I first heard of metaverse, I first heard of Web3 while being there. And for me, all that blockchain stuff that I had on the back of my mind, but because I am a creative person, because I am a marketeer, because I am a brand guy, I could never really lean against. NFTs just made so much fucking sense, because for me it was like, now we're looking at the technology, and the technology is getting together with culture. And we know by history that whenever that happens, we have a new renaissance, right? And that's what's happening. So once I first had that inside, I didn't look back, right? And then my friends were already building within Adidas into the metaverse back in May 21. And I was just like, bring me in. Like, how can I help? I want to be part of this. I want to learn as much as I can. I went down the rabbit hole in so many ways, right? The corporate way, but also the degen side of things. And then we did what we did with Into the Metaverse. And then we did what we did with Prada as well and Adidas, the partnership. And then once that all happened by December 22, I was like, I need to go back. December 21, sorry, I need to go back to what I always done. I've been consulting brands for the last 8 years in digital marketing, digital strategy, and branding. And now what I learned here and what I learned for being a degen in the space, I want to go and red pill the biggest brands in the world. So that's basically what I've been doing for the whole last year.
I love that. I mean, first of all, you're a pro at, at summarizing that. I love seeing the story build upon itself. Starting at the beginning, you had like that knack to never be satisfied with the status quo. You use that to further yourself as an entrepreneur at 14, right? The customizing, that's saying to someone, hey, your tech deck's not good enough, right? Like, we need to make it better. And by the way, I'm the one that can help you with that, which is beautiful. Was that something that you feel like was nurtured into you by your family or your friends, or was it just something that was natural?
It's natural, and it's really funny, because a lot of times it feels so natural that is weird, because it's just what attracts me the most. It's just what sort of like, it's almost like a magnet. It just happens to be that way, and I can feel that when I'm not going those directions, or those sort of like lines that I'm being attracted by this magnet, things don't go as smooth or those don't go as fast as they should or as they could. So for me, it's a very strong almost sort of like a instinct to be doing that, because the more I go towards the direction, the more my vision of being financially free and having freedom of choice fulfills itself, which obviously keeps me on track.
Yeah, it sounds like the speed and velocity towards that goal is affected if you start to succumb to the status quo. So by questioning it, that's how you keep the train going. It's like your
You nailed.
yeah, it's like your fuel, man, or your gas.
Yeah, and I get bored really quick, right? So like,
Feel you on
you
that
know,
one.
so like I'm just kind of like, okay, cool. Marketing has been cool. I've been doing that for so long. All I'm doing now is looking into growth and numbers and analytics. Like, fuck that. What is more interesting? What is out there that I can learn from? And that's how I got into NFTs. I'm like, cool, let's go. Let's learn about this thing now. So that's kind of how I usually go. When things start getting a bit dumb and just like, heavy, like marketing has been getting more and more for the last 5 to 7 years. I need to find an exit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you can see a lot of the echo chamber group think mentality that happens once these things start to catch a little bit of steam. You see it a lot on LinkedIn, you see it a lot in
Yeah.
Discord, to the point now where some of the biggest names out there, the first one being Noun, saying, "I'm not doing Discord anymore." Right? This isn't facilitating good thought. This is facilitating reinforcement of the same thoughts. So you always have to kind of like be on that cutting edge to understand that. When you were at, oh,
Just to
go ahead.
build on that, which in
Yeah.
our space is really difficult, right? Because we live in echo chambers.
Mhm.
Like uh, the 10 meetings I'm going in today that I'm talking to different people, we're all thinking about the same thing the same way. Or you get obviously different insights and different perspectives on how to explain or how to understand things, but it is still an echo chamber. And then when I go to the streets in the city I live here in Portugal, I look around and nobody knows what's happening. Nobody even imagine what we are talking about. And then that kicks and they say like, uh-huh,
Uh,
that's how early we are.
it's interesting because a lot of the early movement and revolution that is Web3 comes from the people that are maxis and saying the same things to each other over and over and over. And now there's like this big call from the marketing angle, which I have been exploring with my show, which is, hey, we need to stray away from this like hard line on exactly what this stuff is and think about how to apply it, which is something I feel like you do really well. The big question that I had when I was preparing for this was, you are owning the original terms. You're owning the fact that you're building stuff like with Porsche on ETH, right? You aren't saying we're building digital collectibles that you can collect through signing in with Google, though you may have been able to do that. You're saying I love Ethereum and I love NFTs. I don't have to change the name. What is it that's kind of driving that just like ownership of these original terms that so many marketers, myself included, have been you know, kind of cognizant of the fact that it might turn some people off.
Yeah, it's an incredible question. And I think that the way of looking into that is that you need to reverse engineer the why. So, the two main question that I am asking brands when I'm joining those conversations is, how do you think this will impact your business? And how do we think we should go about doing that? Right. And for them, in case like Adidas, that we went really clearly to speak with the Web3 crypto native directly, right? Porsche is going in a very similar direction by taking, things what you just said into account. The the question or the answer to that question that I mentioned before, which is how it's going to impact your business and how we should go about it, it comes down to who you want to speak with, right? Who is the audience? Who is the target group? Who is the demographics? And for both brands, which is a clear strategy from looking from the outside, you don't need to be inside to know, those are brands that want to talk to the Web3 crypto NFT native, right? So how to best do that if not fully understanding the community you are getting in, going natively to it, and sort of like creating that relationship in a manner that feels organic and natural to the people that you want to do that relationship with, right? So those are cases that the core objective is to communicate, connect, co-create, and reach that audience. Now, there are obviously other brands that I'm working with that they're going the opposite direction. They want to reach to their already existing consumers, or they want to reach to the wider mainstream quote unquote Web2 audience, right? So to those brands, when we are having conversations and developing strategies and going through that process, obviously they won't go down the route of like calling NFTs, putting, connect with our MetaMask here, or calling whatever underscore eve, or, like the conversation and the comms and the strategy is different, but all comes down to what the brand wants to achieve at the end of the day, right? So that's kind of like what is the fundamental difference, right? I'm working with Shell right now, right? You wouldn't expect Shell looking into that space,
No.
but Shell has a blockchain team inside the company for over 6 years, right? They've been doing stuff on the blockchain for 6 years
So they
now.
were in that first like enterprise blockchain run back in like
Exactly.
2016.
Exactly. And they have a very
Interesting.
strong team in house. And now they're looking into the future of that, right? Okay, blockchain is not something that stays just in the back anymore. It's not just supply chain, it's not enterprise blockchain. Now is a consumer facing technology. How do we apply the intelligence and everything we've developed so far towards that audience, right? But obviously, Shell is not launching a PFP tomorrow to talk to the degens.
I want the
Yeah,
premium gasoline one.
you know what I'm saying? That is clear, but that's sort of like the difference, And if you look at utility use cases, what is also really exciting beyond the sort of like the language, the communication strategy, or even the strategy per se to go to market, is the different ways that those brands are utilizing that technology, right? So if you look it up, for example, what Shell has been doing lately with NFTs, they're utilizing NFTs to represent provenance of energy, right? So what does that mean is the energy business is shifting. It used to be centralized, where there is one power that supplies energy, let's say for a country. And now what's happening, because everybody's getting solar roofs on their roof,
Tesla
you are
batteries.
decentralizing the supply of energy. And because of that, what will be interesting play for a brand like Shell is to become the marketplace where you can come buy and sell energy from peers, right? And what best representation for that ownership or exchange than NFTs? So you see what I'm going? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
depending on where those brands want to go, there are very different plays that can happen, right? It can be more culture driven, it can be more technology driven, can be more business driven, can be more customer experience driven. So that's kind of like the difference, and that's why I'm so excited, because a lot of people, when I first start working with Fortune 500 brands, especially from our space, they're like, oh, you're working with the man now. You go in there and sort of like bringing the man into the space. And I'm like, sure, because you think that we rugging each other and shouting, we all gonna make it on Twitter, having 80% of us being bots is really the way that we're gonna show the world what we discovered.
I love
uh, you
wash
know
trades. What are you talking about?
so that's the thing, if you want to be true to what we believe Web3 stands for, and develop this space in a manner that we can shape a better internet and the best future for creators and ownership and all that jazz, like, we need to go with the big brands too, because they will bring the consumer base.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really good point. And in my head, naturally, being a human, I'm sitting here listening to you talk to Shell, and I'm like, he's totally going towards loyalty. He's totally going towards loyalty. And he's like, no, it's decentralized energy. And my mind just goes.
It's mad. It's interesting. And sitting on those different rooms and being exposed to those different things is just so interesting, because it goes way beyond than what you even imagine, right? Like, when I first got introduced to that project, I was like, fuck, I wouldn't expect that. Super exciting, right? And then I'm working with another automotive brand that they are building a metaverse platform, right? Not for their brand, but for others to come and play in. They're setting up an entire new company for that. And you're like, oh, okay, interesting, let's go down that rabbit hole now, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that happen in that space that's exciting, and that displays that apart, the FTX stuff, a part of the bear market, a part the macroeconomics that we're seeing, those brands are doubling down, right? Adidas has been hiring for a Web3 studio team. Salesforce has a Web3 studio team. Gucci has a bunch of people working there, right? Artifact was purchased by Nike, right? Like, if you think that things are, just slowing down because number is not going up anymore, like, that's where I'm doubling down, because all of them are taking the advantage that numbers are not going up right now, so they can take their time to build a sustainable business.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I have this conversation a lot when I'm talking to fellow Web3ians, and they're saying, when everybody else is leaving, I'm staying. Like, this is the time to be here. There's obviously support from Fortune 500 brands, and it's funny because I was having a conversation at our local Atlanta blockchain center here with
Mm,
some people who were part of the early Bitcoin meetups in 2019, and they worked at Cisco, not the food
mm,
company, the technology company,
sure.
and nobody would host anything there solely because it's Cisco. And I'm just like, why would you not? I mean, this is like one of the oldest technology companies, and you don't want to host events there simply because they're an incumbent, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, I
Mm.
do have a question. When you go in and you're answering your initial two questions, what does that process look like? Because it sounds like it takes a lot of listening to the internal team to make sure that you're aligned with exactly what they want. And then it also sounds like when you're figuring out who's in the market to address, that you have to go out and reach out to those potential customers. So, what does that process look like to you when you go inside?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times in projects, for example, like Porsche, I'm not pulled in day one, right? Like Porsche has literally been building what they're about to launch for about 6 to 8 months, right?
Okay.
And then they bring someone on, could be me or somewhere else, to sort of like have a look on what they've been working, give an external point of view. We reached a point that, we've seen this stuff so often that I would love to get someone of trust that understand both words, branding, marketing, web 2, but also web 3 natively and deep from, down the rabbit hole. So like, what do you think? Right. So depends on how we start the conversation. Other companies, they literally reach out and saying like, we need to educate everyone on what's happening, and we need to start shaping our strategy on how we're going to go about it, right? So we have nothing. And then, within that two questions which I mentioned, the core question for me as a marketeer is, the first action is to get their brand strategy book, right? I go there and say, okay, where is your brand going to be in 5, 10 years from now? And how can we then reverse engineer that goal in a manner that we utilize these new mediums to support that to be achieved, right? So how can we look into how NFT support you becoming the best sports brands in the world, right? How does metaverse supports you becoming the go-to for mobility company in the world, right? So those are the process we go through, and for me, is the easiest way to understand and to help guiding them on what could be a good idea or what could be a good strategy and what is bullshit. Because if that doesn't play well against the brand strategy, there is absolutely no way or no point for them to be doing so, right? So that's usually like how I go about that. And once I filter the brand strategy per se, then we start looking into the business possibilities of it, right? Obviously everybody wants to hear that they're going to make 24 million in 24 hours like Adidas did, but I'm there to say that it's going to be rather the opposite,
Hmm.
right? There shouldn't be an expectation right now on how early we are within the space that revenue, generating revenue will be a clear outcome of what you're doing, right? Because if that's this expectation, it becomes much harder to see the long-term plan and the possibilities, and therefore it becomes much harder to execute against the brand strategy that was the initial idea, right? So a lot of those conversations are back and forth and sense checking, and there are companies that I decide not working with,
Hmm.
right? Because I see that either they are into it with the wrong mentality, or the team that is behind it is not ready yet to the stuff I have to say. Because a lot of times I want Dan to be true to the space. A lot of times I want Dan to, yes, reward the artists in a manner that we reward the artists in Web3, which is they have royalties within the collection, right? Or a lot of times they want to just come in and sell something and make money and then call it a day, right? I'm like, well, that's not going to play out. I'm not putting my name against it. So there is a lot of things that go through that process, and each case is extremely specific. But the difference of what has happened the last 8 months to what's happening now in the last 2 to 3 months is that all those brands are looking on what you just said, right? They're looking into membership, they're looking into things that are less alien to their business, but also less risky or less volatile, that they don't necessarily need to make money in day one, but they can start looking to building a sustainable business for the long run, right? So the The thing I'm recommending brands the most to do as a very first step is one, red pilling their internal employees, right? So literally saying, just do a pull-up, right? Like do a pull-up for this meeting to prove that people attended. Make them create a digital wallet. Nobody needs money. Nobody needs to do through any exchange. Literally just collecting it, right? Oh, cool! Like there is a proof that we've been to that meeting, and then you start building on top of that. Inspire people to get their hands dirty as early as possible, right? And the second thing I'm telling them to do is, now that you've red pill those people and they're more creative and understand this environment more, is how do we go about the same way with our customers, with our already existing clients, right? So you throw in an event or you're sponsoring an event anyway in a month from now. Why don't you do a pull-up? Why don't you do a digital collectible there? Why don't you do something that people don't need a wallet, they can claim with their email? You prepare a journey for people that have claimed with the email to explain then what this is about and how they go about creating a wallet to then own their first digital asset, right? So as soon as you are the one that has brought people to the space in the right manner and it felt good for them, they will remember you forever. And as a brand element, that's priceless, right? So as soon as you start doing those two very simple and small things, it becomes much easier for you to, one, learn how to do it as a collective, as a company, and two, iterate on what you've done by learning through the data as well, right? So if you think about Dune analytics and all those analytics dashboards you have out there, now you can profile and learn much more about the people that are interacting with your digital collectible than you possibly could with people that you're spamming with your CRM program, right? Because there their name, their gender, their zip code, and that's all bullshit within the realm of digital world, right? What you really want to know is what they are interested in, which other collectibles do they own, how active are they, how long have they been active, right? And with that information, that becomes much easier to serve their needs based on their interests, rather than just going about launching a new PFP and hoping that it sticks.
Yeah, wow. Mind racing, which which means that was amazing. One, it's fascinating because it sounds like you go into brands and your first idea is, I'm not here to necessarily change your brand. I'm here to reduce the amount of friction so that you can use this new technology in order to better your brand. I'm not going to be inconsistent. And that all starts with you, the internal customer, right?
Yeah.
And when I say my mind's racing, when you're talking about POAPs, I'm like, man, there's going to be like employee experience companies built on this, because it's not just attending a meeting. What if you give a presentation in a meeting? Do you get a special POAP? Maybe you get an NFT for that, right? And then it kind of incentivizes people to be more active, to be more proactive, to come up with new ideas. I think there's certain people inside companies, myself included. I was in sales for like 6 years doing B2B
Mm-hmm.
SaaS sales. Spent a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time in Salesforce. I was at a company called Marketo at the time, and there's just this friction to create. It's kind of like you go in, you have numbers, you hit the numbers, but I would always dig a little bit deeper and figure out, like, what is an ideal customer profile, right? Like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
operationalize what we do? And this kind of plays in the same vein. You're going in there and you're saying, hey, look, I know you guys run meetings. What happens if you got credit for going to those meetings? Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and by the way, now that you see the power of this, what would it look like when you have your next customer event? Maybe they get a
Yeah.
POAP. I love that. I think
Yeah.
that is
and
amazing.
and and that, to build on top of that, I deeply strongly believe, and I might be wrong on the timeline and the forecasting, but it's inevitable that's going to happen, that every single website in the future, maybe 10, maybe 15 years from now, will have a connect wallet button,
That's that.
right?
So integrations could be dead, right? Because all you really need to connect websites are a digital wallet.
Exactly. And as soon as you do, there are two things that become possible, at least for how far we have seen so far. One is there is an active way of rewarding, consumers and customers, which is if you hold that NFT, collectible, pull up, insert the name here, then you will have this, right? Which can be special content, personalized content, special product, special offering. That's what the gated commerce means, right? All of that is obviously exciting and possible. Uh, and the other way around is also true. So you can airdrop stuff to the people that have been engaging with your brand. And again, engaging doesn't mean spending money, right? Because what you want to do from a brand perspective is to reward the people that give a fuck,
Mhm.
right? Not the people that are spending money and stuff. So if I don't spend money with your brand, but you throw 10 events and I was there in all those 10 events and I've got a pull-up for being there, and now I log into the website and I got free shipping, like that's dope.
Yeah.
Or I log to your website and there's a special message for people that have been to those events. They can go there, claim the photos, blah, blah, blah. Dope. Or I can go there and buy exclusive merch for being one of 100 customers of a ginormous fashion brand. Dope. Right. So that's how you build loyalty. That's how you build, retention. And that's how you give money can buy experiences. I think we'll move more and more and more and more towards that direction, which, is the core principle of membership. Difference is now that those membership programs are going to be on chain. Those membership programs are going to be there forever. Because as far as we are concerned, the major blockchains will outlive humans without a doubt, right? Especially as the technology evolves and we go from like mining and all of that, right? So it's really interesting to think about that, and all of that starts with digital claimables, collectibles, pull-ups, or whatever is the beginning of the journey, can be the beginning of the journey, and that's kind of like what I'm excited about, because then there is no risk, there's a lot of learning, and the upside is on you, brand, to decide how you want to engage with those people now, instead of then sort of like waiting you to give something because they're invested now, because they spend their money and they want more and more and more and more from you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think so many massive businesses have been built on the integration of POS systems just to provide a consistent experience. Meanwhile, there's this beautiful little solution sitting there, which is connect your digital wallet here. And if you happen to spend money, you're there. And if you happen to have collected some sort of POAP, you've also been there. I've saw it. I've had a former guest in the sports area that is trying to reduce the silos between ticketing and buying merchandise and going to events and all this, and like it's a perfect use case, right? You have your fan club, you have your fan club who goes to these events, then your fan club likes this certain player, they buy merchandise. If all that's done through a digital wallet, then you have a beautiful picture. And when you're talking about data, this is intent data. This, like, actually buying things, and you alluded to it, is so much more valuable than PII,
Oh,
right?
100%.
I'm a mid-30s white guy in Atlanta is okay, but like, what do I do every day, right? What did I buy today? Where did I go today? That is so much more powerful to know who that person is. And I
Yeah,
think we're going to see that expanded beyond interaction with brands. I think we're going to start to see it in the hiring space as well. There's going to
big
be
time.
somebody who figures that out. Have you explored
Yeah.
that at all, by the way? Because I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me just conclude on what you just said before, because I want to
Yeah.
make sure I get a point across that is extremely important. Two things. We know how we fucked up on Web 2, and we know what should be better on Web 3, right? So when we start talking about data and privacy and, in Europe here, GDPR compliance and all of that, that should be embed and built in within all those things that we are talking about from day zero, right? And that should be a given. But then on top of that, what we should be striving for is how can we reward the user that now owns its data, rather than the big tech and the big platforms, for wanting to share that data with other parties in order to get a better experience. Because at the end of the day, the excuse of why those big major tech companies are exploiting data from users is because they want to enhance the experience, right? Cool. So pay me to get my data so you can enhance the experience, so I buy more products from you, right? So I think that relationship could be extremely interesting. Is a way for us to start moving from users not owning nothing digitally by start owning its own data digitally, right? Which I think is really exciting. Now moving forward to the other point you made, within the masterclass I have, for example, we have two ways on proving you've acquire knowledge. One is we have 7 modules, and on end of module 1, 3, and 7, you have a POAP, which stands for Proof of Attention Protocol, that you need to answer a quiz that, to show if you pay attention or not.
Yeah.
There are 10 questions, and if you get 7 right, you get a pull-up. If you don't get 7 right, you try it again. 3 times, 3 strikes, gone. You cannot prove you've paid attention because you didn't, right? And that is an NFT. So there are 3 NFTs that you can claim throughout the journey. And then there is an NFT as a certificate that proves you've concluded the course, right? You achieve more than 70% of the course, and other set of requirements for you to claim you've done it, right? So with that, where I'm going is obviously it's exciting and interesting for getting Web2 people and people that I'm engaging with to claim their first NFTs. But the end goal of that is that they can start now building their own chain CV, building their own chain set of experiences, which that's where it's going to be exciting, because the future, and again, I can be wrong on the timelines, but I'm thinking that in 5-10 years from now, we're going to have a own chain CV that we can send, and people can see when we've done, how we've done, provenance, who was behind it, all the data sets that we know that once the data has been input correctly, there is no way to change it, right? So that's what I'm super excited about. And it's really frustrating for me to see today that LinkedIn is lagging so much on that, because I think that they have a major opportunity to start taking advantage of things like that. Because my community is asking me, everyone I engage with from my audience, almost 30,000 plus people, are on LinkedIn. All the 300 plus people that are brand leaders within the biggest brands in the world that have been through my masterclass are on LinkedIn. All the clients I work with since about 1.5 years now that I've got inbound from are on LinkedIn. And they want to start that revolution within all the companies they work for, right? And LinkedIn providing that technology will be groundbreaking for them, because then it's easier for them to convince everybody else that there is utility behind it, right? So that's kind of like what I'm thinking about education and proof of knowledge, proof of attendance or whatever. Because again, that's another way of utilizing NFT and blockchain technology, which is not JPEGs, which is not collectibles.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of the value of doing something like that is honed in on the discretion of issuing tokens from one person to another, which could be useful. I don't think that that's not possible that it won't succeed, but the fact that you can link it to what people have done, not where they have been, that's the real unlock, right?
100%.
A lot of people grew up in the Bay Area and got to be at amazing companies that ended up being unicorns, but actually weren't that good at their job, right? But those same people, or so different people, may not, like me. I grew up in Atlanta. There was not a lot of software companies here, but as soon as I found one, I excelled and I understood technology, and I dug into that kind of stuff. So if you have ways to represent what people have actually done in the space, then you can say, hey, I know Diego has done this at 3 brands. I'll have him come do that at my brand, right?
Yeah.
And like, you're a little bit different because you're very public and figure and you've got a lot of followers, but like, I think you get what I'm saying, right? On a micro level, if you needed to hire somebody, right? Oh, you've done my masterclass. Oh, you've hosted me on a podcast. Okay, cool. Like, you know what you're talking about. Sweet. I actually want to work with you. Right? We share views. That's interesting. One of my big questions for 2023, what you touched on earlier on in the comment, was what happens when UGC becomes UOC? What happens when user generated content becomes user owned content? And I'm not sure yet. I know that right now all the value is being captured by the platforms, and that's going to shift. I mean, if Web3 represents anything, it's the great flattening of this whole ecosystem, right? How are the users going to capture some of the value that these platforms get? Does that mean they're going to be capturing all the value? No, because then businesses wouldn't exist. But there's got to be a good balance there.
I think that's a great question, and I think we can already look into that with ideas of the now, how it operates today. And I'm going to talk from a marketing and branding perspective, and I'm going to use that as an example because I spent the last 4 years there. Is the way we were using UGC within campaigns, let's say launching a new Ultra Boost or a new Stan Smith, is we would encourage users to use a certain hashtag on social media, so we could get access to those pool of images, and then pick and choose the ones that represent the product better, and then pull that on a down the funnel page where people can see how others are using it,
Mhm.
so they can look, oh, looks cool with black leggings, I want to buy it too because I got black leggings, right? But the reward for the user to be on that page initially was just prestige, and after became part of the membership program. So by being chosen to be so, you are getting certain points within the membership program, the Creator Club from Adidas, where you're getting points and you're going higher on the level of the different tiers of the membership program because you are contributing to the brand, to the community. So that example now can be put on steroids through technology and blockchain technology, because instead of like, maybe you're giving me some points, or maybe you maybe don't have a membership program from Adidas, but you got some photos you want to share, and you want to go through the hustle of having a 15th app on your phone that is another membership program from another brand. You go there, collect your wallet, and say, "Pay me, bitch." Right. So I think that's kind of like how we're going about it, right? And that's the shift of how the relationship between customers and brands is going to happen.
When you're talking though, one of the things I often come to in terms of like anecdotal from my guests is what Web3 enables is the ownership that it enables is meshing brand with identity, and it's very evident in your
Mm,
example, right? People are excited to be featured on a page, but they're more excited if they receive
mm.
some sort of ownership around that, whether it's a POAP or an NFT
Yeah,
or what have
yeah,
you, right? And so what happened?
yeah. And can you imagine the amount of business that can be built around that? Like, look just as Amazon review. People have built business of creating proper, decent content, of reviewing hundreds of products
Yeah.
because they're
It's
getting
a direct
reward for doing
monetary
so.
award. And now what happens when you tack something on top of that, right?
100%.
When you become the rare Pepe of of reviews. I love that. How do you there's a few different terms I'd love to get your definitions or descriptions of. I
Mm,
want to start with brand and culture. How do you define brand, and then
mm.
how do you define culture, and then how do you see those two interplaying? Because it sounds like that's a big focus of yours.
Yeah. So for me, brands are a culture, and we need to expand from brands because we think brands and we think like Adidas, Nike, Gucci, either on the fashion realm, or we think about Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, and, on the technology aspect of things. One of the controversial things I say that a lot of people try to get me on, and I won't change that statement, is that even those NFT projects that we are looking right now, like that being Azuki, Doodles, any of them, Utes, whatever it is, they are brands, right? Because what brands basically are, they are a representation of something that a group of individuals decide putting on their bodies or claiming that they own publicly to display the way they want to be perceived. So at the end of the day, is a representation of values, right? Why do I wear a 90cc t-shirt from G Money, right? Because I feel represented by what he's building, and I feel part of that movement of the another thousand people that own this t-shirt, and I want to show to the world what I stand for. Right? It's that simple. Why do people get so excited about having an Apple phone and showing and having a sticker on the back of their car? It's because they show they are part of that. Apple built their brand to be the disruptive, the one that, that famous video of throwing the hammer on Big Brother, like, the creators and all of that, so people feel part of that community and feel represented by that Apple, right, as a logo. So for me, that's what brands are, and at the same time, that's exactly what culture is, right? When you think about like you going around, in the 90s wearing a ACDC t-shirt represents what part of the culture you belong to, right? When you are carrying a skateboard around town, just hanging out with your friends, it represents what part of culture you are, right? And a lot of that is connected to brands as well, because that skateboard, no matter the brand that it has, it is a branding element of yours, right? You mentioned at the beginning, my pink beanie, it is an element of who I stand for and the things I stand for, and that's become an icon of how people perceive me, right? And maybe in the future, people want to have the pink beanie because they resonate with what I have to say.
I want
I
it.
don't know, right? So like that's kind of like the interest. So
Can I
buy
get an
now at
NFT with it? Come on, Diego, give
diegoborgo.com
me the
forward
NFT.
slash pink beanie. It's just four
And
ninety
that's
nine.
$499.
So like that's for that's for me, like the where things are connected, right? So you have brands, you have culture, and again, that's the space I've been navigating throughout my whole life. But what really changed the game right now at the stage we are with Web3 is that we are adding technology to that mix, right? And that's what makes this major powerhouse. And we tend to think about technology as well as just kind of like, computer and software, but technology literally could have been like fire.
Some would argue the
Fire is a
best.
technology, right? Paper was a technology, brush is a technology, paint is a technology, right? So when you had different renaissance in art, for example, because you now had different techniques of utilizing a technology, or you have new technologies that you can utilize to create art differently, that is a moment where culture and technology got together, right? And now it's happening again, because for me, the metaverse is not a channel. The metaverse is a medium for you to tell stories, connect with people, and express, different creative elements within it. NFTs as well, apart from being a technology, is also a medium that can be used, that is connecting culture and technology, right? So that's kind of like what is so exciting for me, and that's why I see this very clear blend between culture and brand, and brand being culture and culture being brand. Because it's just undeniable. But then what is exciting now is that we are adding technology to it, and that what makes the whole thing different. And for me, every single time, and you can look back and past, from the printing time to radio, TV, internet, e-commerce, social media, all those milestones in history that change the ways of communication are connected with culture and technology. And that's why I think that Web3, metaverse, NFT, blockchain, cryptocurrency, DAOs, DeFi, and all of that are at the forefront of this new revolution, of the evolution of the web.
Yeah, I love that. When I hear you talk about culture, uh, and this may be a bit of confirmation bias, but I hear collective identity, right? It is society's identity as a culture, right? You have different societies that are forming out of this. I think, and one of the things that's always interested me has been like the network state by Balaji. A lot of
Mm,
people, that powers their creative side, right? They're like, I'm building towards that because I feel like that
mm.
is reflective of my identity. But when those identities come together, you've got a culture, right?
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
100%. And now, because of the way culture, technology, and the way we interact with other humans, because obviously technology shortened the possibilities of us interacting. Because probably if it would be 40 years ago, I would have never met you in my life, because I would never have gone to Atlanta, or you have never gone to Portugal, and we wouldn't be able to connect. And here we are. So shortening that distance physically has made us to have access to anyone and everyone in the world at scale. And what is a byproduct of that is that instead of us being part of very large communities that everybody shouting at each other and conversations cannot be had, and everybody is sort of like either another number or just another person within that room, we are leaning against niche communities, right? How can I tailor with 35 filters to find a person that thinks exactly like me in this point on time, so I can connect and we can do dope shit together? And that's where we're going to, right? And that's why NFTs are interesting, right? Why 10,000 apes took over, and became what became, is because those 10,000 early adopters to that thing had a set of values that they all resonated with. They're like, fuck, we are early in this space. we're meme lords. We love crypto. We've been early to crypto, been early to DeFi. Now there's a bunch of people here that are trying to figure out what's going to happen, and apes strung together, right? And that sort of like brought people together. And the whole speculation and money making came after that. But until that point, was mainly focused on culture and micro communities, right? The concept of 1,000 true fans is exactly that, right? We're going from the mass influence to micro influence as well in social media. So that trend is going forward, and is going to be more and more so in the future, which I'm again very excited about, because it's much easier now to have access to culture than ever before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember the first time I was pitched Bored Apes when they were like half an ETH, and the pitch was, "These are for the people that are early, but not early enough for CryptoPunks." And that resonated, right? Like there's a lot of people that's like, "Shit, I want a punk. I want a fucking
Yeah,
punk, man." And
yeah,
then these apes come along, and I had a friend who totally bought in, and he bought like 20 apes and started giving them out to his friends. I mean, he changed people's lives, right?
man.
The financial speculation was not part of it. It was being a part
No.
of what that represented, which is that we are
Mm.
slowly, and then setting off what became the craziness of the PFP revolution.
Yeah,
I
100%.
love that. We are nearing the top of the hour, and I do have one more question I want to ask before my traditional closing questions.
Sure.
What role do partnerships play when you are consulting with these large brands? I feel like it's a big highlight of Web3. I talk to a lot of people about it. How do you view partnerships in terms of executing on these Web3 strategies for these Fortune 500 companies?
Yeah, so there I think there are three levels of partnerships, right? And that's going to depend on the strategy that the brand wants to go for. But fundamentally, you have a partnership with projects, right? That being PFPs or communities or creators that can, one, either extend the values of what your brand wants to stand for or stands for, or underpin the values, right? We are the same, or by authenticity, right? Like, oh, we fuck with those people, so like it means that we are here and we are authentic and we do it, right? Which was pretty much what Adidas did with by partnering with Bored Apes, Pixel Vault, and G Money CryptoPunks, right? So that's a partnership level, which is extremely important from a brand perspective, but also to reach new audiences or new communities or new demographics through that. The other partnership is through technology, which I do a lot. So, how do I find someone that is building at the edge of Web3 right now? What is solving a problem for a major Fortune 500 that they will never be able to build as fast? And how I put them together in a room for them to partner and accelerate the success of this project, right? So that's a more technology layer type of thing, which is more connected to business development and so on. And then the third partnership is, how do you find the right people that understand and are not full of shit about the space to help you navigating through this, right? And a lot of people are telling me like, oh, you share so much about what you know for free. Oh, you put everything you know in a masterclass. Oh, the other day you shared a book that had 50 pages for free that someone has written on marketing strategies. Why are you doing that? You're shooting your own foot. I'm like, no, I'm accelerating the intel that the community needs to help us getting there. I don't want to do that alone, and I will never be able to do so. So the way of us getting where we want to go is by multiplying it, right? So how do you help people to get educated on the mission and vision that we have as community to help the big brands to come in and support and build upon it? Otherwise, we're going to go back to Web 2, and then we're going to be excited about Web 4 or 5 years from now, right? So that's kind of like the way I'm thinking about it. So those are sort of like the three levels of partnerships that I try to bring to the table when I work with brands to help them succeed, but also obviously help me expand on the knowledge pool or the perspectives, because obviously I don't know it all.
Yeah. It sounds like, especially when the third one, all I kept hearing was the Naval quote: "Play long-term games with long-term people," and you are playing a long-term game, and it's very
100%.
admirable and like awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, if I am alone here when in 40 years shouting we're all gonna make it, I'll be alone here in 40 years shouting we're all gonna make it. I believe in it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, I have my traditional closing questions. The first one is, how do you describe Web3?
For whom?
Anyone in general. Give me one example.
I mean, it's a difficult one because I have my definition as a degen, but I have my definition as someone that's telling that to someone that never heard of it, right? I think that the conceptual way of looking at Web3 that is exciting and really makes a difference is that we are challenging the status quo on which we've been forced by so many different levels of society our entire lives as population, which is we are told what to do and we need to deal with that. And now we are utilizing technology to create small groups or to create powerful manners on which we can influentiate the system at scale, right? So that's kind of like what I find is exciting about that, and that comes down to the future of how humans exchange value, monetary value online through decentralized currencies, or how humans organize themselves through decentralized autonomous organizations, and how that can potentially shift the fundamental thing in humanity, which is how we organize ourselves, right? Or it can be how we now decentralize the connection between creators and fans by cutting the middleman. We don't need the big labels anymore. We don't need the big TVs anymore. We don't need the big producers anymore. We don't need the big publishers anymore. How do we make that connection closer and beneficial for everyone? And if you want a punchline, for me, Web3 stands for win-win-win, right? How do we create relationships where everybody involved within that relationship, being the creator, the consumer, and the brand in that case, can win and profit from?
Bring WAGME back. I feel like people have abandoned WAGME.
So I'm saying I'm here 40 years after that. I always still say it.
I'm with you. I also like let's fucking grow. That's also,
Yeah,
I
let's
love that
go.
tagline. So the final question's forward looking. We've talked a lot about the future, so feel free to refer back to something in the episode. But where do you see yourself in Web3 in the next 6 to 12 months? And then where do you see yourself and the industry writ large if Web3 is too constrictive, expand in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So despite the timeline, my role in the space is the same. I will be the one loud and shouting on what I have seen, and trying to show the world, not convinced, but show what I have seen and why it matters, and trying to translate the difficulty into a simple manner that everyone can relate with. So I want to be that ambassador that comes in a manner that everybody feels welcome to be part of it, right? That's why I chose LinkedIn. While everybody's on Twitter, I was like, Twitter is cool and shit, but there's a billion of people on LinkedIn that want to know about it and don't feel welcome coming into Twitter, right? Our community is not welcoming, especially when it comes to women, when it comes to minorities, and when it comes to anyone. We were talking about it before we hit record, so I want to be that person that creates a safe space for everyone to come and learn about it, to grow and develop, and ultimately find a way on which they can free themselves and achieve their dreams through that. Because we are going through a major revolution right now, as we did with the internet. I was too young when that happened, right? And now I'm not letting it go. So that's the overall idea. So no matter the timeline, that's how I see my role within that space. And I think the difference will be on the way the message is going to be delivered. Obviously, 5-10 years from now, we won't be using the same terms. We won't be talking about the same details and the same sort of like nuances. That's going to become either more common sense, or it's just kind of like something that was at the beginning of it, right? We don't talk about how you were surfing the web, and then someone called your house and your roommate picked up, and your connection is gone. We don't talk about that anymore, but that was a fact at the early stage of the internet, right? So I think that the lingo is going to be different, but the message and the empowerment that this technological shift brings is I think is what my mission is about.
Oh, this has been such a pleasure, Diego. Your thinking is just so crisp, and I'm feeding off of it. This is probably one of the most energized I've ever been from a show. So thank you so much
Appreciate
for
it, man.
coming on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, man, let's fucking grow.
Let's fucking grow. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the platform. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Web3 with me. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you want to connect with me personally, you can find me on Twitter at Zach_French_.